I never thought I'd watch my dream cabin go up in flames, while the very person responsible stood on the street corner laughing like it was some sick comedy show. But that's exactly what happened when Karen, the president of our HOA, decided. She wanted to teach me a lesson for not bowing to her endless rules. What she didn't know. I wasn't just another homeowner, worked in law enforcement, and when the smoke cleared, I'd be the one holding the pen that signed her arrest warrant. I bought my cabin 6 years ago, a little 2-story retreat tucked in the pines near the mountains. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. I'd built half of it myself, laying down cedar planks, carving the deck with my own hands, and even wiring the solar panels. To me, it wasn't just property, it was freedom. Unfortunately, freedom doesn't exist in the vocabulary of our homeowners association. Our HOA president, a middle-aged woman named Karen, ran the neighborhood like a dictator. She had a bob haircut so sharp it looked like a weapon, and a voice that could strip paint off a wall. From trash bins being too visible, 2 mailboxes being an inch too high, she'd find everyone for anything, but she especially had it. Out for me, see? I didn't attend her weekly HOA council meetings where she played queen of the neighborhood. I didn't repaint my cabin every year to maintain uniformity. When she demanded I remove my American flag because it wasn't aesthetically consistent, I told her exactly where she could shove her clipboard. From that day on, I had a target on my back. It started small. Notes slipped under my door in angry handwriting. Your cabin doesn't match the HOA color palette. Failure to comply will result in action. You think you're above the rules? You're not. I shrugged them off. After all, I paid my dues and my property taxes were up to date. What could she really do? But then one night, I came home to find my fence knocked over. Another day, I discovered my truck tires mysteriously slashed. Isn't it? My security cameras installed to prevent exactly this nonsense were ripped right off the siding. I had my suspicions. But without proof, I couldn't act. Still, as a police investigator with over 15 years in service, I'd learned to be patient. People like Karen always escalated, and escalate she did. It was a Saturday morning when it happened. I was inside, brewing coffee, when I smelled something odd, something acrid. Not the woodsy smell of a fireplace, but burning chemicals. By the time I stepped outside, the side of my cabin was already engulfed in flames. The heat blasted me backward, sparks snapping across the deck I'd spent years building. I sprinted for the hose. But the fire was spreading too fast. I called 911 and shouted for help, but when I ran toward the road, my stomach dropped. There. In the middle of the only path leading to my cabin, Karen had parked her SUV sideways. Behind her, 2 other HOA members stood smugly, folding there. Arms like bouncers at a club. "Move your car," I screamed. "The fire trucks won't be able to get through." Karen laughed, holding her phone up like she was recording a TikTok. "Maybe next time you'll follow the rules." "No. Is your precious little cabin melting?" I couldn't believe it. This wasn't pettiness anymore. This was arson and obstruction. The fire trucks arrived minutes later. Sirens wailing, but they skidded to a halt at the blockade. Firefighters jumped out, furious, ordering Karen to move. She refused, shouting about neighborhood security and how she was protecting HOA property values. By the time police arrived and forced her SUV out of the way, my cabin was half gone. Flames ripped through the roof, glass shattered, and years of work turned to ash. Karen. She stood there, smirking, arms crossed. That was the moment I swore she would pay. The fire chief pulled me aside after it was finally contained. His words chilled me worse than the mountain air. This wasn't an accident. Someone poured accelerant. Along the siding, I already knew who, but knowing and proving are 2 different things. I filed my own parallel investigation, careful not to overstep since it was technically my case. But being in law enforcement has its perks. I knew what evidence to look for. Within days, we had it. Security footage from a neighbor's porch showing Karen carrying a red gas can toward my property at dawn. Tire tracks matching her SUV near the cabin's service road. A receipt from the hardware store where she'd bought lighter fluid and matches, and the cherry on top, audio from a neighbor who recorded her bragging at an HOA meeting. He thinks he's special because he's a cop. Let's see how special he feels when his little cabin is a pile of ashes. That was all I needed. I'll never forget the look on her face when two uniformed officers walked up to her porch a week later. She opened the door in her robe, sipping coffee, and said, "What now? Another fake complaint from Mr. Cabin Man?" Instead, one officer replied flatly, "Karen Walters, you're under arrest for arson, obstruction of emergency services, and reckless endangerment." Mug of coffee slipped from her hand, shattering. On the porch? What? You can't do this? I'm the HOA president. I run this neighborhood. But the cuffs clicked tight around her wrists anyway. I stood at the end of the walkway, watching as they marched her toward the cruiser. She saw me, and her bravado finally cracked. You set me up. This is harassment." I didn't say a word. I just watched because the real satisfaction came later. At the station, I was asked to sign off on the final report as both the victim and an investigator. I sat there with the file open, pen in hand, reading every charge stacked against her. It was more than enough to put her away for years. First-degree arson obstruction, of justice endangerment, of life and property criminal mischief. And when I reached the signature line, I paused just long enough to remember her laugh as my cabin burned. Then, I signed my name with deliberate strokes. That was the exact moment the HOA queen lost her crown. During the trial, Karen tried everything, crying on the stand, claiming I had planted evidence, even suggesting the fire was a government conspiracy. The jury didn't buy a single word. The neighbor's recording sealed her fate. Hearing her own voice bragging about burning my cabin destroyed whatever sympathy she might have had. When the guilty verdict was read, she broke down in sobs, mascara running down her cheeks. She looked around the courtroom for anyone to defend her. But the HOA members who once stood proudly by her side didn't even show up. She was sentenced to 15 years. Losing the cabin hurt. It wasn't just wood and nails, it was years of work and dreams. But I rebuilt. Insurance helped, yes, but so did the dozens of neighbors who quietly came forward afterward, telling me how relieved they were she was gone. They brought food, tools, and even helped hammer new boards. Turns out Karen had terrorized everyone, not just me, and this time, when I planted the new flagpole on my deck, nobody dared tell me to take it down. Months later, I visited the jail during a routine case. Check. Through the glass, Karen sat across from me in an orange jumpsuit. Her once perfect hair was dull, her nails chipped, her face hardened. "You think you won?" she spat. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "No, Karen. Justice won. Burned down a man's home and laughed while you blocked fire trucks. Now you get to live in a concrete box instead of a cabin." She tried to glare, but her eyes welled up. For the first time, she looked small. I stood, tapped the glass, and walked away. That was the last time I ever saw her. People like Karen believe rules are weapons, not guidelines. She thought her clipboard gave her power over everyone. The end, her arrogance burned brighter than the fire she set, and it consumed her. My cabin stands again, stronger than before. Every time I sit on my porch with a cup of coffee, I remember the day she laughed at the flames, and the day I signed her arrest. For more interesting and heart-touching stories, hit the subscribe button now.